Hey, welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Radio Show. Excited, always. Do you ever get tired of me saying I'm excited about whatever I'm going to be talking about? Hey, if you do, hit me up in the comments, right? I just realized I had my light on here. I'm trying to experiment with lighting, better lighting for those that watch on YouTube, the Compassionate Capitalist Show on YouTube. Okay, so today I was inspired on a topic, two things. One, I'm rebooting an old show that is very relevant to my topic, which is this employee shortage that we're going through. But part of what sparked my idea to do this as a renewed topic, based on my guests that I interviewed before, which I'll explain in a minute, was it's all over the news, right? On one hand, it's the best job market we've ever had. There's more jobs available now across the board than ever in the history of America. So from that perspective, our economy is fully recovered and then some. But there's also this lagging absence of employees to fill those jobs and skilled employees to fill specific jobs that they have, and also unskilled employees to fill the service industry jobs. A lot of the service industry was impacted dramatically. We see that every day when we go out and we see these videos and these crazy things of people being very frustrated by the level of service they are getting at their, retail, restaurants, all of those kind of things. Plus the people working there being fed up with the working conditions, the pay, the lack of flexibility, the lack of access to childcare. So I was inspired, and I'll tell you more about that here in just a second. But let me give you some stats, right? So you can understand why we are in it. It's not just because people don't want to work. That's clearly not the reason why we are in this. It's because, on one hand, there's more savings. People have saved more money in the last 2 years than they had in a very long period of time because it just really weren't going out. And that has given them some options. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have a lot of options, right? So the stimulus bill did give people ability to do some savings while they transition through that. And part of this is that, according to a study by MetLife, that 1 in 4 women have felt that way in this, have left the workforce since the summer of 2020. Pew Research found that 13% of the women without a high school education had left the workforce, and 6% with a high school education but not college had left the workforce, over and beyond the normal transition and turnover that you have since 2020 into 2021, and they're not back in the workforce. That's more than double than the men that have not returned to the workforce. And part of this is when you are in those that academic level, so the skills you have are just showing up and doing a job, then you don't have a specific skill. You've not gone to trade school to learn how to be a forklift operator, or you've to be a coder in STEM, right? Or to be a truck driver, or to be an HVAC person, or to be actually a nurse. We had a real big shortage of nurses because that's another big exit area. But part of it is that those usually were single parent or double parent, where one parent, both parents, they needed both incomes in order to get by. And with the uncertainty of school closings due to COVID and the rising cost of childcare, because oftentimes some of the people that worked in childcare were these unskilled folks. They might have a high school education or a GED or a limited 2-year education kind of thing. And sometimes the reason why they worked in childcare was because their own children. But with children not being able to be vaccinated, and a large part of those that are 6 and over choosing not to be vaccinated. It's a very risky proposition for somebody that's in the childcare business, particularly if they have small children at home. And so this rising cost of childcare, it is something that the current government has been trying to get through as part of the Build Back Better, would it be to provide tax incentives or provide incentives to corporations to offer that, and then provide it as part of other income related benefits to single parents or single income households that need to have somebody be able to take care of their kids so they can work. Can't leave a 5-year-old at home, folks. You just can't do it, right? Okay, so without any support network from public or private sources, corporations aren't doing it, as well as the government's not doing it. In select places they are because of the way the government operates in those states. But for the most part, by and large, it's not offered. And in some businesses, some tech businesses might offer that. There was a period of time where they would allow people to they'd operate a daycare on premise, and that of course changed during COVID. So there's estimated to be about 3 million women no longer working in those primarily service-related jobs. And according to Pew Research, 3.2 million more boomers retired in 2020 than in 2019. And that trend continued to add a full percentage point to the ages of 56 to 60. So a percentage point across the country, that's a big number, okay, of ages 57 to 65 that have left the workforce and not returned, and 2% of those over 65. In the no college education category, or college educated, and that was all in the no college educated category. In the college educated category, it did not change. The professional boomers are still working. They just went ahead and retired. Many of them, maybe not forever, but at least some time until some form of sanity is restored. Those ones that, again, were in the service related industry. And part of this is because, the way people are so stressed, and the anxiety that they're feeling, and the misinformation about the safety of masks, the safety of vaccines, the non-approved treatments for dealing with COVID, all of that stuff, the misinformation that's been continued to perpetuate itself. And you hear about misinformation in the news, but unfortunately, those that have chosen to believe the misinformation, being told that it's misinformation, only reinforces their perception that they're the ones with the actual truth and everybody else is wrong, even though, like, just the statistics of the people that get it and don't get it are clear that it's better to have the vaccine double boosted, triple boosted, all that kind of stuff, plus wearing a mask as a preventive measure. And so people that were working in the service industry that had to deal with people being angry at them, people frustrated over the level of service, frustrated by the work environment, frustrated that an employer doesn't take the precautions, that an employer buys into this freedom to infect others mantra, that they don't want to work for somebody like that. And so, it's the employers that make people not want to work there, combined with what I'm going to talk about today. And that is when folks in the people start to have this epiphany. And this is what has led to what we call the Great Resignation. You might have heard that term. And so according to MetLife, again, more than half, 56% of the women that are in corporate jobs, mid-career jobs, say they've thought about a career change during the pandemic. This has to do with a lot of the issues we've already addressed, but also the sexism in the workplace, and for people of color, it's the racism that they feel from their coworkers, the marginalized being marginalized within the workforce, being questioned on their capabilities, and not receiving the same level of advancement, and the pay discrepancies. The whole 80% rule, that's for white women. White women make 80 cents on a dollar across the board in every industry, just about. Maybe not so much in some like in some construction industries or in some transportation jobs, but otherwise, yeah, definitely. And particularly those that are, let's say, at my age, that are pre-retirement age, it's not as much. Somebody starting out today, it's much more of a level playing field. But if they started out like when I started out with IBM, I knew the guys. They were, they were same level of education, same level of experience, in some cases unrelated. This guy, good friend of mine, he had a marine biology degree. I had an MBA. He got hired in at $10,000 more than me, I found out. So when you start to get increases, and it's a 5% increase or it's a 10% increase, guess what? It's an increase on top of an already bigger number. There's no way to catch up. So that 80% difference only gets bigger the longer you're in that workforce, unless you jump a job to go into something else that you are based on your experience, and now a level playing field, you can make more money. So you resign a job and go get another job. That's what women are doing, and that was a lot of what people of color are doing. But the other thing is that they're deciding to pursue a passion. So according to Harvard Business Review, the average increase in resignations from 2020 to 2021 was more than 20% for mid-career professionals across the board, not sex or race nullified within that, between the ages of 30 and 45. Okay. And then the other ones just left. Younger and older, not as much. On one hand, you have a segment that do not have specialized training or skills. Those are the non-college educated, and have been the least valued in our workforce, right? Whether it's a food server to food preparers to teachers. Teachers have been asked to be a front line in this pandemic, and they get paid peanuts compared to what the contribution they make to our society. A starting salary in some places is $17,000. After you get tenure in public education, you might make 35 or 40. So it ends up being the second career, if you will, of a two-income household. Get the summers off, be with the kids, all that kind of stuff. But if you got to be home with the kids, you're not teaching. Same thing with nurses. Nurses that are your basic level nurses coming in that are doing the basic stuff of they're on their feet all day. They're overworked. They are disrespected by the doctors. They're yelled at by the patients, and it can be very stressful, particularly during COVID, when you saw so many people die, and now even worse when people could be preventing it and choosing not to prevent it and they die. So that's one part of it. And, it's just real economic realities for a lot of people that have to choose one of the household breadwinners has to stay home. And of course, count to the fact that, how many hundreds of millions of people have died from COVID and their families have been impacted by that. And if they had life insurance, then that other spouse might have chosen to stay out of the workforce till this thing subsides and go get additional education. So we saw a lot of people pick up and do additional education and finish out a degree or get additional certificates or advance themselves in some way so that they could have a better job. They might have, graduated with a liberal arts degree or a history degree or something, and they found themselves when they came out of college at an entry level, just, having no choice but to be a bartender, so to speak. And then they, just kind of got stuck in that routine, and COVID gave them an opportunity to reassess and reevaluate the things that they wanted to do. And the Great Resignation is also about people realizing during a worldwide pandemic that life is short, and to be unhappy with your career and your life choices. They might have had revelations about their marriage situation or about their own sense of identity and who they wanted to be identified by as. And then, and that causes them to reevaluate and make changes. So the person that I'm going to, the podcast that I'm getting to, that you're going to see after I do this other segment, Sarah Dahmen, master coppersmith. This was recorded back in 2019 before we even thought there might be, some people, I guess, knew that there might be a pandemic, but we sure didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. Her thriving company, housecopper.com, is something to check out, and definitely catch her on Instagram. It's really fascinating when it pops into my feed and seeing what works of art she's doing. And I'm not going to steal thunder from the podcast to tell you about that. But it was a fascinating conversation with this courageous, intentional entrepreneur that really did her own version of the Great Resignation back then, when circumstances were just, it was her choice for a better life, a more fulfilling life. And then even for myself, I'm sort of doing the same thing. Although like mine started kind of before the pandemic, when I pivoted to really bring this compassionate capitalist idea to the market. I started to launch a speaking career right at the beginning of the pandemic. That obviously I'd done a lot of speaking previously, but not with a specific intent, not with the idea that I was going to go out there and have a platform of a story to tell that the economic development groups out there would want to hear, the investor, financial manager, wealth managers would want to hear, the entrepreneurs that were, moving on to the next phase of their life to become entrepreneur and investors, that they would want to hear. And I didn't really know how to transition to be doing pure on, this, even though I do this every week, don't I? So anyway, I'm building for something that has much greater potential for my own pursuit of generational wealth. I'm not making as much money as I did when I was running the angel investor group and doing, pitch events and large public conferences with hundreds of people in attendance and 20 companies pitching their deals to 200 VCs and angel investors in the room. The money that I made back then was good, but it really didn't scale like I thought it was going to scale. And what I'm working on now is my thumbprint that's to be left behind will not only in theory create residual generational wealth for my family, but also leave a legacy of this idea of compassionate capitalism. That, when more than me, myself, and I are espousing the virtue and reward, when people like you that listen to this say, yes, I want to embrace that education, that concept, that paradigm shift to be a compassionate capitalism. And, oh, by the way, have you heard about the compassionate capitalist movement and Karen Rands and what she's doing? It's really exciting. When that starts to happen, then I know that my thumbprint on this world is there. So what triggered this is that I get this magazine. It's called, it's Google's Year in Search, which is quite fascinating that they print this out and include it in the newspaper. I got it in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution because we take Sunday and one day during the week, because I really do like the old-fashioned sit and read the paper on Sunday at the breakfast table kind of a thing. And I spend so much time looking at electronic fields. It's refreshing to read a traditional newspaper, fold it over, all that stuff, Anyway, so it's a fascinating look at search trends, and they expanded into real life stories. So last year they had come out with it, the first year of COVID, of everybody being home, and it was fascinating. And so this one, it's good casual reading to pick up and glance at something. And so in this example, should I quit my job and how to try something new hit the highest level of a Google search history ever? Not surprising in hindsight, now that we know what this thing is called the Great Resignation and the Great Exodus of the job market. But what's interesting are the stories and the motivation. So, like, for example, this serial tech entrepreneur, right? So somebody in a tech world, Alexandra, she became a screenwriter producer. So she created a tech agency that helped other companies visualize their vision, but I was starting to feel passionless. I'm looking for a creative outlet and to be more expressive. So I'm going into screenwriting and film production. And before I get to the point where I am doing a disservice, I wanted to make a change. That's somewhat of correlation to when I came out trans, being authentic and doing what I want to do. All right. Then there's this guy, Luis. He started Sonarai, a Spanish language mental health marketplace. Like many startups, Sonarai originated from its founder's own need. Luis Suarez was working a demanding job as a management consultant and planning a wedding when the pandemic began in the US. So he looked for a therapist to help him cope with the stress. But Suarez, a native of Mexico City, wanted someone who spoke Spanish, and just 5% of American mental health professionals fit that bill. So he created Sonarai, where Spanish speakers can book virtual therapy appointments with psychologists in Mexico at a variety of price points. All right. And then you have another example is a professional dancer manager went back to school to become an MBA student. Tara Sheena in her 30s. Okay. I felt complicated about leaving my career in general, but I also felt like it was a necessity because there weren't a ton of safety nets in place for me. I don't think I've dealt with the fact that I'll probably never dance professionally, tour, or perform again. These are things I'm used to doing and have built my life around. I'm still in that transition. And once I've moved through that phase, I think I'll enjoy having a different relationship with my art. I don't have to do it as a career anymore. That's the flip side of the coin. And I can have it be something in my life that makes me happy and something I can tap into when I need it, not something I need to create value or to create a career space for myself. So she went back to school. And then you have an example of a medical office administrator that transitioned to become a software engineer. Clarissa, 28, so in the millennial age, my office closed due to COVID, and I was doing mostly auditing and going through all the insurance claims. I noticed I was starting to really like that part of my job. I was up until 4 a.m. and I didn't even notice. My roommate was like, I think you'd like data science. I could see that imposter syndrome was a big battle. I would say whoever is changing their career should try and surround themselves with people who are supportive of their change. My old job, it just felt like I was going to work. Now doing this, it's really hitting the point where I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm being challenged and I'm actually learning. The salary difference is almost triple what I used to make. And so I'm able to now help my mom and my sister. And then this guy that was a professor and a dean of a business school, Del Smith, 45, in that age group, when he decided to give up a tenure, so he could have just ridden it out, right? To pursue his dream of starting a company to address disparities in clinical trials. After his mother died of tuberculosis and his biological father died of cancer, Smith saw a need for getting more people of color into pharmaceutical trials where they often make up less than 10% of the participants. He started Acclinate on the side in 2019, but eventually realized he'd have to commit to building the business. The company addresses the issue through spreading awareness, building engagement, and using the technology to connect pharmaceutical companies and participants. My personal finances were screaming, maybe not now, but I have faith we were going to figure out a solution. And at some point I have to make the leap. You don't want to be in the middle. So his business, he was able to use some of his stimulus money to sustain him. And now his business is up 350% over 2020. And this year he started paying himself a salary. So, and the last one, because I think it relates directly to my conversation with Sarah. Okay. And the reason why you're going to want to listen to this conversation with Sarah, she not only talks about the reasons why she moved from corporate and then her own entrepreneur business to this very hands-on business that she does now, but it was in a field that she had no inclination, and it was a primarily dominated male field. and how she went about getting the experiences she needed, finding the mentors to teach her what she needed to do, going through the process of gaining credibility in the marketplace, and to be the successful, loving what she does now. So, technical product manager turned bladesmith, Jenny Coe, 41. So, in that mid-career professional woman. My last day was in March. The toxicity was eating away at me. This is what I talk about, the corporate world and the environment that so many of us women have had to deal with. And I needed to heal as a person. I think being in corporate for so long as a female, queer, Asian, working in technology, had its own trauma. My partner and I started watching the knife making competition on TV, and I became obsessed with how one starts to make knives. I was always producing and refining or organizing and collaborating with a group of people, but never something I was really in charge of creating from start to finish. With knife making, that's what I get to do. I'm the one that designs it and says, this is the kind of knife I want to make and the kind of handle I want to have and the materials I want to use. And this is going to be its purpose. Once I started to really understand that, it became so alluring. So if you are an entrepreneur out there listening to this, if you're a corporate exec listening to this, if you're an investor listening to this, because that's who my audience is on the Compassionate Capitalist Show, I want to encourage you to think about the backstory of a company that is starting up and where do they come from and what their passion is, because that is part of what the compassion is, of passion for the company. And, and also be a little easier on those businesses that are struggling. Go support those small businesses that are struggling to find the workers. And if you're a mentor or an advisor or a large shareholder of a company, ask about the turnover rates, ask about the exodus numbers, and then look and see if maybe there's things that they could do in their HR policies that would help them retain high quality, devoted workers. Okay. And that's more than just giving it lip service of having a little community group to talk about this issue or that issue. It's about giving them real tangible things, paying for mental health services. Most companies don't include that in their insurance, helping with childcare, providing short-term leave of absences if they've got to take care of somebody with COVID or their kids are at home, being flexible on that, helping them be able to work remote, and measure them by objectives, not by the hours that they clock. Do they get the work done? And if you have managers that are old school managers that are like a 9 to 5 kind of a thing, and if they can't reach you in 5 minutes, send them back to school and teach them some empathy. As long as that employee is reaching their goals and objectives that you've mutually agreed to, that are in line with the business and the business direction, then that employee is valued. And never do what that guy did to lay off all those people on the cell phone, on a Zoom call, and accuse them of stealing from the company because they didn't have as high a production numbers. Right? A whole nother story. But I wanted you to understand this issue with the Great Resignation, the reasons behind it, the reasons why we have such a gap in our hiring right now. And we have a serious epidemic of those people that have retired out that took their skills with them that haven't been replaced, right? And funding within something like the Build Back Better bill or some piece of that to say, we will fund tech schools for those fields that we have a shortage of employees, or provide incentives to the hiring entities to provide education, to accelerate the apprenticeships that they have to do so that they can get people to work fixing and helping our supply chain, helping our infrastructure that we have to do, filling into the crisis we have in healthcare, the crisis we have in education, the crisis we have in a lot of tech jobs where we don't have people that know how to lay cable. We don't have people with experience in doing a lot of things nowadays for all those reasons that I've described. And please enjoy this next segment that is the interview with Sarah Dahmen of Coppersmith. No, actually, what's her housecopper.com, which I believe is her Instagram as well. So, and thank you for listening, watching. Onwards and upwards.
All right.
Hello, welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist Radio Podcast. This is Karen Rands, your host, and this is going to be an interesting show because we're doing it all as a YouTube video as well as a podcast. So I want to encourage people to go and look at the link in the profile for the YouTube if they want to see the visuals on this, and because it's going to be really interesting. I have a really terrific guest, and one of the things for people that have listened to this show on a regular basis is that I'm always looking for really innovative and exciting maverick type of businesses that can be showcased that have sort of not necessarily done the norm. They've been and entrepreneurs that have forged their pathway to pursue their dream and their passion so that they can do something they love, which is the passion. That kind of comes into the compassionate capitalist, right? And make money, right? It's the capitalist side of it, and then you have an entrepreneur with a passion that creates a company. And with the investors that I train to invest in companies, they look at that from a compassionate capitalist standpoint because they're pursuing, helping bring innovation to the market and fund the passion in the company. So that's sort of a play on words, how that goes together. And so my guest today is Sarah Dahmen, and she really has been a maverick. It's been, when we first talked before we were getting up the show, I was just stunned. And then going back and looking at her bio, she, started out with, you sort of call it storied and a varied career, because she started out doing commercials for Citgo. Then she started a event planning business, a wedding planning business. She'll talk about sort of her pathway and her motivations in that. That became a Silver Anvil award-winning event coordinating company. And then after she sold that, she was looking to write a book. It's called Widow 1881, and won a Laramie Award for that, for Western historical fiction and fiction book of the year from Arthur Circle. But in the course of doing her research for that, she discovered this lost art of making copper and tin cookware. And there's no other women. She's pretty certain she's the only woman that does this. There's very few people in the United States that actually even have this skill. And so as she's gone through her pathway to, it's not like you just start knitting or something that everybody can do. This is something that is very specialized, has very special equipment, has, special materials, and a talent that is, that artisan, it's almost, lost within our current, history of the United States. And so I just thought this was just going to be fascinating to learn about her journey. She's going to give us a little demonstration or show us her workshop here in a little bit. But I want other entrepreneurs out there that are thinking about and are facing an unknown, a fear of going out and starting their own business, or something that they think might just be kind of crazy. Should I go do this? Nobody else doing it. I'm not sure if there's a marketplace, any of that kind of stuff. That to hear about Sarah's story so that you can know that there's not only a woman that stepped out of her comfort zone to go do this, plenty of women do event planning businesses, but for artisan, it's a small niche of people, but also even a smaller niche for a woman to be able to do this. And I just think she's going to have a great story to tell. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome onto the show. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to
Hi,
the Effective
Karen.
Capitalist podcast. Uh,
Thank you.
so, I know. Let's talk about your passion. Talk about your of why you went from corporate world to become an entrepreneur first, and then we'll talk about how you went from running a traditional type of a business to running a real market maker type of a business. Re-energizing a whole new area of skilled talent. I guess I'm not quite sure. You'll probably give me some good words to
Yeah,
describe
like a
that.
skilled trade. Yeah, no, I know. It's almost like we don't even have the vocabulary for it anymore. It's so old, it's almost lost. Well, starting out in the corporate world, it was the path that everyone is kind of told to take, right?
Yeah.
These days. And you're encouraged to go white collar, you're encouraged to get a 4-year degree, and from there everything just kind of snowballs into the corporate world. And I was in advertising and I was in marketing, so I was making these commercials and producing advertisements, and it was fun and it was challenging, like any job is when you first get started. But it was also a place where I noticed there was a glass ceiling very quickly for women. And I didn't even know that was a term at the time, but I could see how it was. There were not a lot of women in the creative side of advertising to begin with, but also it wasn't the men's creativity was highly valued, where the women's, it wasn't as apparent. So I didn't feel like that was where I wanted to spend the next 50 years of my life. And in the worst time ever, I decided to leave right as the market crashed at the end of 2008. And the worst time, why would you get rid of a job with security? And looking back, I think we didn't know what was really happening economically. So my husband and I were like, let's do it. You can, take your wedding planning business, focus on that. I had kind of started it on the side, as most, I think, entrepreneurs do. I feel like a lot of us, people I've talked to, they kind of dip their toe in while they have a safety net of a corporate job. And that's great. It makes you sure you like it, and you're not investing right off the start, and you're making sure there's a place for you in your market. But yeah, we decided to just plunge in, and I did. And I'm glad I did, because it was baptism by fire. This market wasn't supporting event planners at the time. And the people that were in the industry, it was an old boys club. And that surprised me.
Really? For
Because
event planning?
yeah.
And even wedding planning? Or you just found a niche in wedding planning as an event
Well,
planner?
no, there were wedding planners too, but you were up against a handful of people who had been in the industry a long time. The people who did the rentals and the floral, and they were all men who owned the company, and they were very unwelcoming to me, and I wasn't an anomaly. They had their clique. No matter who would come into the market was going to get kind of stiff armed, and the people that you were trying to pitch to, they were like, I don't know, it's Wisconsin, we don't need a wedding planner. That seems really luxurious. So it still had so many challenges, and there were times I'm like, why did I do this? But I did find my, pardon?
I said, well, you broke through because you
I
made it
did,
into
yeah,
a.
I did. After a while, you start to learn that the BS you're saying actually is true, and you don't have to make it up as you go along, because you get better at it, and you just have to keep doing it and keep meeting new people, and try not to get bogged down with all the negativity and your own insane self-doubt. And I did find a niche actually in doing a lot of charity events. That was what got the silver anvil for the company, was doing a nonprofit event. And And so I spent a lot of time and energy donating my time, or even getting paid very nominally to do these types of events. But um, they were great because they were huge, and they were a wonderful way to learn on the grand scale. So
Yeah, and get your name out there in a very positive way. One of the best things you can do as an entrepreneur is figure out a way to get free advertising. And if you've got a nonprofit that's promoting an event, and you trade where you get some kind of like sponsorship or some kind of notoriety within the event and the program, and thanks very much, and all this kind of stuff, then other people, because the people that attend go, oh, this was a great event, maybe she'll do something for us. And it opens up doors, and you're there, so you're mixing, meeting the folks, and you know and it's, yeah, that's guerrilla marketing 101, right?
oh yeah. Oh, I never hear people use that phrase, and it's so true.
It's kind of old school. I don't know that they use that term anymore.
But they don't. But the funny thing is, if you use it with like people who are in their 20s or early 30s now, they look at you like you've just invented this brand new idea.
Oh, good. I'm going to do a podcast on guerrilla marketing, and it'll be like a whole new thing,
It would be. I mean, it is. And honestly, to your point, the relationships that were created, both working on events or working with people who are also on committees with those events, those things have paid off in spades, even far and above the event planning company or anything. It was those interpersonal networks that have been the most valuable thing I've gotten out of any job, whether that was corporate or in event planning or beyond, is the relationships. People don't they always say networking, but it's like, you have to really, like, networking is a real thing, and you have to genuinely care about the people you're networking with, and not just look at them as like a mark. They have to be people, and people react to that authenticity, and it gets you really far, especially if you mean it.
Oh, yeah.
um
We could do a whole segment on networking. I had one of my employees a long time ago that I needed to teach her how to go out and network. And there's this old book. She just mailed it back to me. She hasn't worked for me for 9 years or something like that. And she found it when she was like decluttering, and how to work a room. And I think it's just as an aside, in today's digital world of communication, that there's a whole generation of folks that are coming out of college or whatever with no idea how to walk up and shake somebody's hand and introduce themselves in a face-to-face thing. I had many years ago, when I first started getting involved in Yelp, went to one of these thank you events that they were doing for their big Yelpers, whatever, and it was all these young folks there. I was clearly a more seasoned person in that room. And I went there because I was going to network. I was like, okay, I'm going to go meet all these people. I'm going to do all this stuff. I took one of my folks that works for me, that he was a master networker with me. We could meet anybody in a room and have a good conversation, like you say, like you really actually talk to them. And I teach this when I do Entrepreneurs Raising Capital, how to network for capital. It's a component that you have to be able to have a conversation and draw people in without chasing after them, and they feel boxed up against the wall, right? And so the book was called it was How to Work a Room. And at this Yelp thing, we're standing in line to whatever, and I'm trying to talk to the people around me, and they were all like, oh, we have to talk to people. It was really crazy, where I was like, there's an opportunity here for people to go out and teach Gen X, Gen Y, whatever. I don't want to say the M
yeah.
word. I don't want to say the M word, on how to go out and network and do that kind of a thing. So anyway, that's an aside. So I'm glad that you realize that, because you seem pretty young. And so you realized early on, starting your own business, it's make or break. If you don't know how to go out and network and follow up and follow through with contacts to create the business, you're basically dead in the water, because you just get lost in the shuffle of social media if you're just trying to advertise and do that kind of thing. You got to get out there and
Yes. And yes. And the follow-up is is huge. And to kind of segue into even doing the coppersmithing, first of all, most of the people who do this, you pick up the phone and talk to them. You go meet them physically. You spend time with them, hours and hours in a shop. It's hands-on. It's apprenticeship work like they did 300 years ago. It's you have to be able to, talk to your elders as both peers, but also as mentors. You have to talk to people about things that, like, I had to go up to people and be like, hi, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have the terminology. I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is what I want to do. Can you help me? I'm willing to learn. I'm an open book. And I received 20 different mentors of, various different walks in the metal world, who were more than generous with their time and their knowledge and remain part of my life even now. And that is something I think that can be applied no matter what your field is. I mean, I'm in something really off the wall, but no matter what you want to do, it really comes down to maintaining those relationships beyond the networking. Yes, following up. Yes, checking in. Yes, if you say you're going to send somebody a document within 24 hours, like, do it. And then if you're an hour late, apologize. Like, it's not, it's not like rocket science, but I think it gets lost in the shuffle of today's, like, high speed online presence.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, and I feel like you asked me a second part to the first question on from corporate world to now, and I don't remember what it was.
Well,
sorry.
let me just get in on a point that you just said there, because you talked about the event planning, and it was like this old, with corporate world, it was a old boys network. In the event planning, you had a sort of a geographically, but also old boys network kind of a thing, because you're, breaking in within the community and they all knew each other. And here you are, the only woman doing this. And so, but sounds like you didn't receive the same sort of closed dooredness. They were very open to you. So is it the passion to the art that made them open? The fact that anybody even wanted to learn this, they were just happy for that because of a small community that way?
Well, I think it was two of the things you said and then some. It was first and foremost, and I know this sounds, the only way I can explain it is, these people I'm talking to, a lot of them would be considered in mainstream society as blue collar workers. They're tradespeople.
Yeah.
And the only way to share your trade and your knowledge is to be open to talking to other people about it, or it dies when you die. And that mentality is different than white collar, I think, because white collar, you go to college and then, the next generation takes over when the other generation retires, and everybody knows, if you're an accountant, the next breed of accountants are going to come and it's done. Trades are different. You have to be willing to talk and share and teach, and because that's the only way. So I think there's that difference in mentality in sharing knowledge. It's more of a inclusive mentality as opposed to a competitive one. And yeah, I was enthusiastic. I'm a woman, and that was different. And let me give an example. So the first time I went with my product designer, who's also a young mom like me, we went up to the foundry where they would pour the cast iron for the handles for the copper, for my cast iron skillets and things. And we're two blonde girls, and we show up, and you could see it, the whole foundry is full of men, and you could see the reaction was like, there are girls in the foundry, and these same guys would walk back and forth just to check. Yep, there's chicks in the like. It was such an anomaly and kind of cool because it was so unique. So I think people responded to the fact that I was a woman. And yeah, it's a lost art, and I wanted to do something that wasn't being done before. And this group of people, their reaction was, that's cool. We're in, let's figure this out together. So,
nice.
And I meant what I was doing, and I followed through. And I think everyone responded to that really well. And so I think it was a lot of factors that came together. but it still feels very serendipitous, and I still feel very lucky with what I received from everybody in the
Yeah.
industry.
So how long have you been a coppersmith?
4 years.
4 years. Yeah, I looked
Yeah.
at your website. Why don't you tell everybody your website? Because I was really amazed at um, the variety that you had, and all of the different things. So we'll in a minute we'll go into your workshop, but tell everybody your website, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you decide what to make and things like that.
Oh, sure. So the website is just housecopper.com, and every house should have copper. So housecopper.com, and yeah, that was my mentality. And my hope is that everybody figures out that they need like 1 or 2 cast iron skillets, maybe 1 big stock pot, couple of pieces of copper, and some pottery bowls, and that's it. That's all you need in your kitchen, and it'll get passed on to every generation so that we have less waste. And ideally everybody has that, like no matter your socioeconomic status. I want it to become the norm. I don't know how to do that with the raw material cost of copper, but that's my hope.
Yeah, so I mean, when we first talked, we talk about the advantages of using copper and tin, and kind of how you didn't just find out about it because you were doing a historical stuff. You learned that it was a better material, and I guess and a little bit by why did we get away from it as a cooking kind of a concept. I mean, because at one of the bargain basement places I go to shop for stuff, they have copper pots as seen on TV or stuff like that, but clearly it's not the same as what you make. So talk a little bit about that, the differences and all of that.
Sure. Well, historically, most kitchens had a handful of very, what we would say, kind of pure cookware. So things would be made out of clay. So pottery, things would be made out of iron, just plain old cast iron, and things would be made out of copper or brass, but that's still a component of copper. And that was it. We didn't have anything synthetic. We didn't even have aluminum until after the World Wars. So, your kitchen, I mean, that's why even in Downton Abbey, if you watch Downton Abbey and watch what they cook on, they're cooking on copper, because that was before the World Wars. That's what they had. And, part of that was because it was the materials that we historically would use, but also people, whether or not they understood the science of it. I mean, copper specifically is 25 times faster than stainless steel. So if you put the two on, and it needs less heat to get to be that fast. So it's energy efficient, and especially when it's lined with tin. And part of that is because tin it bonds to the copper on a molecular level, so that fast heat that you get from the copper kind of pushes through the tin at once, and boom, you have, for very little energy, and in very quick time, you have boiling water, or you have your soup is hot, or whatever it is. Whereas with stainless, it takes longer. So even if you have those copper pots that are lined with stainless, you may as well just buy a stainless steel pot, because copper gets hot and it still has to work its way through the stainless interior. But it's fast, and it doesn't rust. So sometimes when I'm sitting outside and I'm working on one of my pots, I think to myself, there is a good chance somewhere, someday, in 5,000 years, someone's going to dig up one of my pots, because they don't corrode. They're not made with iron. They're copper, and copper doesn't rust. And even now when we go out, like I'll show you, I'm repairing a coffee pot that's probably 300 years old. And when it's done, she'll be able to use it. She's going to be able to use this pot, and she will be, and it's usable another 100 years from now. And that's amazing to me. I never get tired of dealing with a material that is so, it is an heirloom.
Yeah, that's right. I remember now you talking about a big part of your business is people coming to you to repair things that they, inherited, or they discover at some kind of an estate sale or an antique place or something like that. And so if people were out and they're doing that kind of shopping for that kind of stuff, what do they look for? Do people automatically know like a shop owner that this is something, even though it may not be in great condition, that is highly valuable? Or, do people just take that stuff and go, you know what, I'm going to go melt it down and sell it for the metal? Or, could talk a little bit about, Antique Roadshow or something and how they
Sure.
discover this.
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes I get like Uber drivers, when they find out what I do, then they take my card and send me photos of like something they have. They're like, can you tell me what this is from? It's like personal Antique Roadshow. Um, first and foremost, a lot of really good antique store owners, they understand what they have when they have a copper pot. And I do have relationships with some places that will send me just boxes to refurbish. And then they'll resell them. They know what they have. If you inherit any copper, there's a couple of things. One, check and see if you find it at an estate sale. If it's lined with tin or the inside looks kind of really crappy, that's good, because that can be refurbished. If you get something that's lined with stainless and it's kind of out of whack or out of shape, or the copper's burned out or chipped, or sorry, it's not repairable, because I can't get to both sides of the copper because of the stainless interior. So when a stainless steel lined copper pot is ruined or anything, it's kind of just throw it. It's worthless. You need it. The only way to make it last is to use those historical pieces, or to make it the way they used to hundreds of years ago, because then they can be refurbished. And so you look for interiors, but something to note, and it's funny, I get a lot of people who think that they have these amazing copper pots, but they're made in a foreign country, and the quality of the copper is not pure. And then they wonder why they don't tin up very well. And it's because they're not made with pure copper. They're made with an alloy, or they're made of very cheaply deoxidized copper, and it doesn't take. And so there is a difference in where it was made. So if it was made in Portugal or India or Turkey, it may not refurbish as well as something made in Europe or America. And so that's, kind of see if you can find a mark.
So where do they find the raw materials for copper in the U.S.?
Around here, I get my raw sheets out of Houston, Texas. That's where it's smelted. I believe that a chunk of that is actually mined in Arizona, and also in Canada, and a good chunk of it is also recycled copper, like out of old TVs.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah. I put my old VCR up on FreeCycle, saying I think you could at least get the copper out of here for transistors or something like that if you want to, do that. So, okay, why don't we go do a little show and tell, and let's see, because you say you use utensil or tools that are actually the same sort of tools, or the same tools they used hundreds of years ago and stuff too, right? And yes. So, I'm fascinated. I can't wait to see.
We're gonna go on a road trip.
Yeah, and on your website, say the website again.
Housecopper.com.
And do you have videos of you doing this work and stuff on there?
Yes, I believe there's a video link on the website, or else you can always just find, House Copper on YouTube. And hopefully we'll go. So I don't know how the best way to do this. I'm like, this is the garage. I'm going to be echoey. This is the shop. So here's kind of my shop. And I know it's really hard to see. And I'm going to take these off. I guess I should have. These tools, if you can see them, can you see these?
Oh yeah. So
these are those are hand craned tools that are several hundred years old. For instance,
look like they're made out of iron.
They're made out of cast iron and brass. So this one, and I wish there was an easier way to show these. I feel like but. Like this one here is probably from 1805.
Oh, wow.
So I still use them to make, I'm trying to see if I can, they're really crazy. Yeah. There's the coffee pot that's 300 years old.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. That's beautiful. So,
thank you.
Okay. So part of your going through your, apprenticeship on this was even like, oh, there's 4 of these things that are used for different parts of, and then you had to get them because if they're that old, they're not readily available, right? And there's
No,
not somebody, making new ones. So
no. You can get very similar tools made in China still to this day, because they're tinsmiths, like people who do your HVACs and stuff in your house. Those are what tinsmiths are today. So they can get more modernized versions of a lot of these. But I like using the traditional ones. And so here, like, I'm gonna, like, you can see like that big, let's see that right there.
yeah.
That's how you cut a lot of big pieces. This is a giant piece that's just for one thing, and that's to put seams into copper. That's it. I mean, all of these tools have one purpose in the entire production of it. So, this right here, like people always go, wow, this is, I mean, it's massive. It's just massive. And I know you can't really tell, but I mean, all it is putting a groove. That's all it's used for.
So when you were talking earlier about how you get your handles are made out of cast iron,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
so you get those pre-made, and then do you get sheets of copper that you melt or smelt into the shape that you have for your pots and things like that? Or how does that go about becoming in the shape of a pot?
Sure. Well, so the handles were designed. I found a traditional old brass piece and then just had my friend, my product designer, she like took the actual original handle from the early 1800s and had it turned into a computer program that then could be re-poured into iron. And then the same thing, the sheets of copper get cut with water into the correct circles, because I can't smelt in my garage. I mean, you need an entire foundry for that. But they get cut, and then a couple of guys in Ohio will take these, and these big circles of flat copper, and they'll pull them on their big, I mean, the CNC machine they use is about as big as half my garage, and they pull the copper up the tool I had made. And they do that, and they have to watch it, because if they take it off too soon, the copper's so soft the pot would collapse or be really soft when you're cooking. And if they don't take it off fast enough, it'll work harden so much that the top rim will crack. So they have to know what they're doing, and they had to figure it out too. They had no idea what they were. If you would have asked them 5 years ago if they could spin copper, they'd be like, maybe. I mean, nobody was doing it.
What were they doing before that they had a spinner or whatever?
Oh, aluminum stuff, aluminum and steel, stainless steel, but never copper, because copper is this whole different crazy animal. And people in this country were not used to it. I mean, I spent probably months on the phone trying to find someone who would help me do this, because every answer was, we don't do that, and we don't know where to send you. Sorry.
So, I mean, you recognize there was an opportunity because, or you assumed, people,
Pretty much
because,
assumed,
yeah, they're gonna, even though people don't really make these things anymore, people are going to want them. And so, you spent months researching it, finding partners, learning how to do it, and learning what you needed, because you don't know what you don't know till you discover that you didn't know it, right?
yeah. Right.
And so, I mean, that's just fascinating. I'm trying to think of it within a context of something else that, I mean, it's pure, even though copper pots have been around for hundreds of years, it really feels like you almost invented something new, almost like, so now the guys that mentored you or you apprenticed with, do they make pots, or are they using something, are they doing something different?
One of the guys has his copper cookware company, but he's basically making French cookware designs on American soil. That's kind of his gig. And I specifically wanted to make American designs, which we really only had for a short time before, because we were either copying European designs or we started making aluminum cookware. So we're talking, you could count it in decades. when we had like the fur trade kettles and we had specific American designs, that a lot of them are lost to posterity. So when I did this, I said, I want to make what's no longer made. And that's, of course, comes with its own challenges, and everybody's freaking out about different things because nobody knows what we're doing. And then I also have an actual authentic apprenticeship with a master smith, a master tinsmith is what he calls himself. I do more copper, he does more tin. He's 70 and his name is Bob, and he's got a white beard and he wears suspenders, and he has a garage shop, and I go up there a few times a week for a handful of hours whenever I can get away from kids and my work and stuff. And he's the one who taught me the traditional methods that I could apply even more towards, you know, the modern cookware that you see on my website, because it's all still there. It's just sometimes, you know, you're using different gauges of copper and you know, some people come to me and they want custom things. Well, I can only do that using the old ways. So, and I've had that apprenticeship now for 3 years, and he's been awesome.
Yeah.
It's like so old school. Yeah.
So you're making a quart pot, you know, whatever, and you were figuring it. So you start out with sort of like traditional kind of, these are the kind of pots that everybody needs and stuff like that. When those guys were learning how to spin it and these things, or you were learning, if you make a mistake, are you able to reuse the copper and start over again? Oh, okay, that's good. So yeah, so what you know, I think about those like American Express commercials, you know, got this or this, and finally it's priceless, right? So talk about that feeling when you made your first pot and it actually worked and you were like, we're done, here it is, it worked. I mean,
right? You know what it was? It was, oh, thank God I can do this. I don't have to find another job. Because I still am, even though I'm the only woman, and even though there's so few people doing this, and it is a specialized trade that no one can ever take away from me, it's still incredibly scary because every day there's a learning experience. Every day there's a challenge. Every day I have to make it up. I mean, even fixing that copper coffee pot, I showed the guys, there's a handful of men and me on a Facebook coppersmithing site. And I showed them the hole in this pot I would have to repair. And they're all like, just give up. Just ask them if you can make them a new one. Like, just give up. And I was like, no, I think I can figure it out. And I did. But it was like, you know, we all still are like figuring it out, because even a lot of the old guys that are doing this, they're figuring it out as they go along. And we're all getting together going, what's your favorite flux? I mean, did anyone discover the best? Because nobody knows, because no one wrote it down and we're all guessing. And so it's still it's still scary all the time, because I still feel like I could mess up at any time and just have to quit. So you know, because there's not the same support system. That's never been done. There's no roadmap. I don't know what point I'm going to hit a wall I'm not going to be able to, you know, go over. So it's kind of like entrepreneurship on drugs.
So you used the word flux. Is that a
oh yes, when you
lingo?
Right, flux, when you are when you tin the inside of a copper pot, I can give visuals. So like, this is one of my skillets. This is what it looks like before it's food safe. So it's still copper on the inside. And then I have to put it over fire. So I had built a fire in my garage. And in order to get the tin, which makes it food safe and makes it nonstick and everything, to stick to and bond molecularly to the copper, I have to spray like a fluid. And it creates the molecular bond. It helps bond things. I mean, back in the day, they used like pine rosin. So now we have mechanical. And then when it's done, you know, the insides will look like this.
Oh, shiny. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then the outside, oh, there, yeah, because that's like well used. That inside looks brand new. The outside's all covered with char.
Yeah, that was an old piece that that actually belonged to Daniel Dunat, who was a chef in the 80s, well-known chef in the 80s. And this is one of his pieces. that his daughter sent to me. So, you know, I
So
mean,
is
you can,
the tin melted and you, because that's what was up on the side. So do you spin it
oh
around
yeah.
or how do you get it to be even?
Well, I'm standing over the fire with the pot
With like
and
one of these giant head things to keep the heat off of
yeah.
you and stuff like that and big gloves and
Oh
okay.
yeah. Yep. And then once the pot is hot enough, you spray in the flux, which you get, you know, it's not, it's dangerous. I get burned a lot. and and then you can, the pot is hot enough that the tin will melt into it, and then I'm digging my hand while it's over the fire, and I'm moving all the molten metal around and getting it to tin line, and you have to do it right or the tin looks like shit. So it's like it's a constant struggle.
And then if you do get it where like down in the corners or something and it drip, I mean, I can't even spray paint, it drips, right? And so,
Right.
you know, you have to start all over again and melt tin off of
Sometimes,
it.
yes. Yes, sometimes I have to strip and start all over or put it over the heat. Some pots I'll put over the heat 3-4 times and they still don't take, or they don't, you know, it there's no guarantee. Anytime I'm using an old pot, I don't know what kind of copper it is. I don't know how it'll react. I mean, every pot is a little bit scary, but you
Yeah.
do it.
So with the hole, so when they're like on that hole that you had, I mean, to me, the obvious thing would be is like you get another piece of copper and you just slap it on there and polish it and sand it down. And obviously it wasn't that easy. So, you know,
No.
because you don't
Um,
melt the copper, you're not melting the copper to fit in there, and you can't do just the seam because then it's not going to be smooth. And is that a trade secret? Can you share what you figured out to be able to do that?
Yes, you can do a patch. That one I had to do a specific type of patch because the copper was so old and so brittle that if I were to do a normal patch, I would have actually melted the copper away. So I had to do something totally different. But what normally you do, if you have an old pot that's tin lined, it has a crack, or you know something happened where it cracked for whatever reason, or it got really really hot and brittle and it cracked. Very rare, but it happens. You braise it. So you have to get it insanely hot, and you take tin and copper and you make brass. Let me see. I think maybe I can show it. I don't know. Can you see? There's like a seam,
Oh, sure.
like brass.
Yeah.
That that's how you, and how they used to for many years before they had like metal spinning machines. That's how they would seal the copper, and it would make it waterproof, and it would take away. You know, you'd be able to patch anything using extreme high heat and making brass essentially. It's amazing. It's such an amazing trade, and it's one of those things where it's like people will be like, we'll stop by and we'll hang out and just see your shop, and 2 hours later they still haven't left because it's just there's so much to learn, and it's so interesting because everybody cooks and
What
everybody wants to know about what they're cooking in, and everybody realizes suddenly that they've never asked the questions about their cookware the way they've asked same question, certain questions about their food, and it opens up a world that they never thought about. We're so used to just pulling something out and starting to cook, and it's really fun because everyone uses cookware, so everyone feels connected to it too, and that's really fun, the sharing.
So when are they going to have a TV show? They do all these other TV shows about all these, fixing up hot rod cars and all kinds of stuff. Where's the copper show?
We're working on it actually.
Okay. I might
There
have
is
to
a
watch HGTV to watch you on there. If you're on there. I'm going to
we'll
go
have
subscribe to your YouTube channel. This is fascinating.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, it is a really fun thing, and it's been fun on YouTube too to see a lot of people who are like, I think I want to try this. So
You go, yeah, bring it on. We need
I'm like,
more.
sure. Like, good luck. I finally was like, okay, here's a safety video. If you guys are really doing this, please use all of this equipment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is talk, and there is a showrunner, and people out in LA, and there's buzzing, but who knows? When it happens, I'll be excited, and I want to share all of this. But until then, I guess it's just YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we've been chatting for a while, and I'm just fascinated. I could probably talk, another hour, whatever. But I don't know that people would necessarily listen to that. So I want to encourage everybody to go watch the YouTube on this, even if you listen to the podcast, because it is quite interesting. Um, and I want to encourage folks, please, the star of the show here is Sarah, and you need to go to her website, but mine is KarenRands.co, and you can get information about my book, and you can learn what we do to help entrepreneurs. The main thing that I've always wanted to do is empower entrepreneurs to pursue their passion. And that's why my tag of compassionate capitalism, and I talk about, creating wealth through funded innovation. And so the innovation in Sarah's business is that she stepped back in time and brought a lost art back into the mainstream, in effect, or getting there, awareness of it. And so it's using old tools, but it's really, I think, very innovative because it is a lost art. And so, and entering into the unknown of figuring out how to solve these problems on a daily basis as you work through it, and you are, and to be able to get clearly such joy out of doing that, there's wealth in financially, but also in your daily, just joy waking up and doing what you do on a daily basis. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me wax on about copper on here. It's always my favorite thing to talk about. So it's awesome.
So anything you want to leave with our listeners and our viewers on, entrepreneurism, on, forging the way that you did, any women business, anything you want to, little golden copper tidbits you want to leave?
The one thing and the way I kind of now run my life, and I think it works for a mentality of entrepreneurialism, is to just, if you want to try something, just do it and don't overthink it, and do it well, and do it right, and do it, so, I have friends now and they go, I have my, this business I'm kind of starting, and when I get caught and I start to overthink it and I start to get nervous and I think, what would Sarah do? She'd tell me to just do it. So just do it, just do it, and forge ahead, knowing that you're going to get hit with 100 unknowns and then some, but then just keep doing it, and it'll pay off.
Well, and it's, there's this trendy term called growth hack, right? And that's, and what it really means is that as you're moving through your process, you're interacting with your customers, so you know exactly what it is that they want. And you do that really on a daily basis. I mean, there was a kind of a selfish motivation for you to get started because you saw this as a lost artisan to bring in, and you wanted to do that. But then you quickly found that there were people out there that were looking for somebody to be able to do that. And they come to you with, whether it's fixing an heirloom, or, I want to get this type of a pot, or do you have anything else like this? Or somebody responds and asks you, now you know that there's another type of pot or something that people might want, and things like that. So very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for taking your time and showing us all about the brand new world of copper pots and cookware.
Well, thanks again, Karen. This was awesome fun.
Thank you. I really, really enjoyed it. So with that, I'm going to say onward and upward is always how I finish my shows, because you just get in the business, get in the market, do what you got to do, fix it, and move forward. If you hit a bump, climb over, get over the bump, and just keep going, keep on keeping on. And thank you very much, Sarah. I really enjoyed having you on the show today.
Thank you.